but the 10 centimeters between your ears and your brain is kind of the hardest thing to change.
Hello and welcome to Turn Off, Turn On Ventures. Today I'm here in Amsterdam with Lucas from BYCS, and we're here to learn a bit more about active mobility and what makes the Netherlands such a great place for cycling and where bicycles actually make a lot of sense. So, hi Lucas.
Hey.
Maybe you can give us a quick introduction about yourself and BYCS.
Sure. So I'm Lucas. I'm the Research and Advocacy Manager of BYCS, which is a small NGO and social enterprise based in Amsterdam with a small office in Bengaluru in India. And our belief is that essentially bicycles transform cities, and in today's globalized world, cities transform the world. And so we promote cycling as a mode of daily transportation and support community-led initiatives that kind of lead to urban change through cycling. And so we really position cycling as a means to achieve more livable, resilient, equitable, and sustainable cities and healthy cities. And we take kind of some of the learnings that we have, obviously being kind of a Dutch organization, and try to apply some of those learnings in a contextual manner. So really working with local community groups, activists, organizations and governments to not necessarily Amsterdamify, but try to lead to the kind of cooperation between different stakeholders that can achieve kind of and unlock the kind of cities that we believe are more livable. And we have a focus on culture. So while infrastructure, and we'll see a lot of that when we go far right, is absolutely essential, there's also a component that we call human infrastructure that is really key in changing people's habits, changing people's minds about how they move through the city, and making sure that cycling is a mode that can be accessed and identified in a positive way by a large kind of portion of the population.
Interesting. So clearly there's two big parties involved that you're trying to connect and bring change, systemic change to. One of it is the people, the humans who live in the city, and the other side of it is the cities and the way it's designed.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess in all the programs that BYCS sort of designs and delivers, from the perspective of these two groups of people, what are, I guess, the three things that can be done for the human side of things, and then the city side of things?
Yeah, it's a good question. So on the first part, on the kind of behavioral side of things, there's a need to recognize that there are actually a lot of barriers to start cycling, whether that is the identification of cycling in many contexts as the poor man's transport, or conversely as the kind of hipster, affluent man, which is kind of also creates a problem of identification with a large portion of the population, but also skills. You know, it's a misconception that everybody knows how to ride a bike, and if you're an adult, it's really hard to learn. Access as well. You know, the cost of a bicycle is of course relatively affordable compared to like a car or even the use of public transport over time, but for a lot of families that are low income, that is a barrier. And then there are kind of a lot of other barriers. You know, the gender gap in cycling is very big because of the harassment that occurs of women that are cycling, so that's kind of also like a cultural norm side of things, and so on and so forth. And so we try to develop programs that support the uptake of cycling from vulnerable groups. So whether that is integrating a youth perspective in the promotion of cycling by working with children, or having bicycle education courses for women caregivers, which is an example of an initiative that we're currently developing around the world. We try to focus on the needs of the more vulnerable groups and then develop behavioral programming that kind of supports a shift from whatever mode that person is currently using to kind of a more active mode, and we kind of argue that also has a lot of benefits for health, mental health, economic empowerment, all of these kind of things, and obviously contributing to a more sustainable city. On the infrastructure side of things, I mean, that is, like I said, not our area of expertise, but of course, the main thing that is needed in the transformation of our cities is the creation of connected and protected bike lanes. That is kind of what has come across kind of in a lot of the cities that are now, let's say, more mature in cycling. There's this phrase, kind of build it and they will come. And that is true. What we tend to kind of add a layer on is build it and who will come. And how do you make sure that the the large portion of the population can come that cycling is truly inclusive. But definitely infrastructure, bike lanes, absolutely critical, and bike lanes with that kind of vulnerable user as the baseline. And so not having a bike lane that is too narrow, so that if you're a parent and you want to cycle with your kid, you feel comfortable doing that on a bike lane that is wide enough, or a bike lane that connects more residential areas where caregivers might travel more, instead of just developing kind of these bike corridors from residential areas to the central business district, right? Which then excludes other kinds of trips. And then, of course, bicycle parking, bike share systems, all of these are kind of part of the harder factors that can lead to uptake. And for that as well, something that we say, I'm giving the example of caregivers a lot because we're working on that right now, but when you see a bike share system, it's very rare that you actually see a baby seat on it or a basket to carry groceries. And so we try to kind of engage with cities and industry players on that side of things, of like, great that you're doing infrastructure, but how about you add that kind of more inclusive layer so that if you're a parent, you can use this public infrastructure, which is bike share systems, and also access cycling. So yeah, that would be kind of some perspectives on those two sides of things. And if they are implemented in tandem, if you do kind of develop a master plan and then you add that layer of kind of behavioral change and promotion and cultural development, you kind of tend to see uptake rise more than if you're just doing either or in isolation.
Yeah. Amazing. Lucas, I thought it would be good to talk about yourself as well. Tell me a bit more about, I guess, cycling. How did you get into it?
Yeah, I have it's always interesting to see that how I kind of organically ended up in cycling. I was working in transportation and more kind of public transport, and also kind of the articulation of technology and transport, so rideshare in North America before that. But actually, as a very young child, I was living in Paris and was going through Paris on the back of my mother's bike. So she's an avid cyclist, and from my earliest age, I was traveling through the city on this kind of mode of transportation. And I've been a cyclist in many cities that I've lived in. I've been a cyclist in Los Angeles, which is not a cycle-friendly city. I've been a cyclist in Montreal, which also has kind of harsh winters. Paris, Mexico City, and I found that in every city it is a very empowering mode where I have kind of autonomy, independence, reliability, and of course kind of feelings of positivity while I cycle. And so it's a mode of transport that I identify a lot with personally, which makes my job easier, because when I'm trying to convince people about the benefits of it, kind of I like live and breathe that every day. And obviously now living in Amsterdam, I kind of see those benefits every day when I'm going to see friends or going to the park or going to work. It's something that just makes my life so much easier and makes me healthier and happier. And so it's really a no-brainer for me, and I do have that personal investment as well in it throughout my life path. So it's interesting that I ended up working on cycling specifically. I think there's a lot of excitement around technology and how technology can solve transport challenges and climate challenges. I found also working in those sectors that sometimes the low-tech solutions are some of the best that we have, and cycling is like a 100-year-old plus invention, 200-year-old invention, and it still confers the same benefits as it always has. It's a very cheap mode to implement on the city level, and it has just tremendous benefits. And so I think it's one of those tools that are in our toolkits that we should consider more, while also, of course, talking about the electrification of vehicles, things like that. But the principle that we should be following is the reduction of private vehicles in the city, and cycling is the perfect tool to kind of replace that for short trips, at least in most cities. Yeah.
So you've been an avid cyclist, so user of the product. Now you're working on programs to help get more people on bikes, help make cities more bike friendly. So you'll be very familiar with sort of both the bicycle and what is necessary to bring more bicycles on the road. Is there something about this space, something interesting about this space that I guess the general public, general cyclists don't really know, but they really should know?
About the promotion of cycling?
Just something less, like not so obvious, but really important.
Yeah, I would once again reiterate those behavioral barriers, because I think we really need to encourage people to change their minds. I think there's a quote that I really like to give from the mayor of Tirana in Albania, which is a city that's done a lot for children and kind of active mobility recently. And he says, the infrastructure in our streets, we know what to do, right? Like we know what we need to do to redesign our cities for people. But the 10 centimeters between your ears and your brain is kind of the hardest thing to change. And it is true. I think there's sometimes we don't see how deeply car culture has kind of penetrated our minds and our desires and our associations with success and what is a normal way of moving through the city, when actually shifting to cycling can really be like an aha moment about how to kind of live a healthier and more positive life, and that has kind of benefits both for an individual, their community, and the environment. And so I think that is something that we really need to think about when we are promoting cycling, that yes, we need to redesign our cities, but we also need to consider what are the challenges and how can we promote cycling in a way that makes everyone kind of excited about it. There still is a lot of backlash about cycling and cycle lanes around the world, and we really need to change our mind, essentially. It is, I think you said, a paradigm shift. We really need to create that paradigm shift, and if we don't start really tackling culture, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. And I guess to end off, what would you tell someone who hasn't really cycled in their life and is open to exploring this? What would you say to them to convince them to get a bike, get cycling?
I think the easiest way to really understand and feel confident and comfortable is to try, right? And so I would say give it a try in a safe environment, with friends, with community. Go for a ride and see how you feel when you are in a safer environment, and then progressively move towards cycling in your daily life in the city. Of course, perceived safety is a huge challenge, and we need to redesign our cities, but also kind of starting slow, whether you're riding through a park with friends or family, and really trying to understand what that is making you feel, and the independence that you get from it, and the thrill of cycling so give it a go would be kind of my and give it a go with people that can help you and support you through that process.
Amazing. Great. Well, it's time for you to help and support me on my ride around Amsterdam. So let's go for the ride now.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
See ya. Wow.
And it's open all night, so it kind of crosses the city in a way that makes it like kind of like a transect, so you can access the central areas of the city in a very central way. Yeah, it's quite nicely done. Amsterdam has a lot of parks. Actually, it's a very green city. People always like to talk about cycling, which is of course like one of the great factors about the city, but also access to water, green space.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so you have examples of this throughout the city, basically, where it used to be car oriented, and now it has been reclaimed for people to hang out, for people to use active modes, to kind of lounge around. And so there's a lot of these kind of urban transformation examples that happened in the last 40 years, essentially, in the city, that are really compelling.